My name is Harold Macaulay. I'm 74 years old, and I've spent most of my life with grease under my fingernails and oil stains on my coveralls. For 43 years, I worked as a mechanic in Bakersfield, California, fixing everything from rusted pickup trucks to fancy sports cars. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it put food on the table. I never thought I'd be raising a child at my age, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. When my daughter Sarah died in that head-on collision on Highway 99 15 years ago, I became the sole guardian of my granddaughter Jenna. She was just 8 then, a smart little girl with her mother's eyes and a curiosity that reminded me of myself at that age. Those early years weren't easy. My small 2-bedroom house in the working-class part of town wasn't much to look at, and my pension from 43 years at Henderson's Auto Service, combined with Social Security, barely covered our basic needs. But Jenna was all the family I had left, and I was determined to give her every opportunity I could afford. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The first signs of trouble started when Jenna hit her teenage years. She began making comments about our neighborhood, comparing our modest home to the houses in the wealthy part of Bakersfield. "Why can't we live somewhere nicer, Grandpa?" she'd ask, wrinkling her nose when I came home smelling of motor oil and brake fluid. My friends' parents have real jobs. Real jobs. Those words stung more than I let on. I'd worked with my hands my entire life, took pride in being able to diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it run. But to Jenna, I was just an embarrassment. She started asking me to drop her off a block away from Bakersfield High, so her classmates wouldn't see my beat-up Ford pickup. Despite her attitude, Jenna excelled academically. She had a natural intelligence that I recognized and wanted to nurture. When her guidance counselor told us she had the grades for a top-tier university, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. The letter came from Stanford University on a Tuesday afternoon, in March of her senior year. Jenna had been accepted into their business program, but the total cost was staggering, over $70,000 a year, including tuition, room, board, and expenses. Her face lit up when she read the acceptance letter, but I watched that excitement fade as she calculated the costs. "We can't afford this, can we?" she said quietly, probably the first time I'd heard genuine sadness in her voice in years. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of financial documents. My house was paid off, worth maybe $220,000 in the current market. I had about $40,000 in my retirement savings and my monthly pension, and Social Security combined brought in $2,200. It wasn't enough for 4 years at Stanford. Not even close. But then I remembered the old Airstream trailer parked behind the house. I'd bought it years ago with my late wife Margaret, planning to travel the country after I retired. We never got that chance after her heart attack 5 years earlier. The trailer had been sitting there, collecting dust and memories. The next morning, I called a dealer in Fresno who specialized in vintage trailers. "I've got a 1985 Airstream International," I told him. 28-footer, excellent condition. "How much?" "Depending on the shape it's in, probably 30 to 35,000, he replied. That afternoon I listed it online. Within a week, a retired couple from Oregon drove down with 32,000 in cash. Combined with my savings, I could cover Jenna's first year at Stanford and take out loans against my house for the remaining 3 years. I called Jenna into the living room that evening. She sat on our old plaid couch, the one I'd bought at a garage sale 20 years earlier, and I handed her a cashier's check for $72,000. "Grandpa, what is this?" she asked, her eyes widening as she read the amount. "That's your first year at Stanford," I said simply. "Tuition, room, board, books, everything you'll need." She stared at the check, then at me. "How did you get this money?" "I sold the Airstream for $32,000. Combined with my retirement savings, that covers your freshman year. I've arranged home equity loans for the next 3 years. Don't worry about how I'll manage the payments. That's my problem to solve." For a moment, I saw something in her eyes that looked like the little girl I used to know. She hugged me tight, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she understood the magnitude of what I was doing for her. "You're the only family I have left, Jenna," I told her. "Your education is the most important investment I can make." She left for Palo Alto that August. I drove her up in my pickup truck, helping her move into her dorm room at Roble Hall. The other parents were driving BMWs and Mercedes, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly income. I felt out of place in my clean but worn jeans and button-down shirt, but I was proud. My granddaughter was going to Stanford University. The first semester she called every Sunday. We'd talk for an hour about her classes, her professors, the incredible opportunities opening up before her. She was studying business administration and marketing, already talking about starting her own company someday. "I want to create something that matters, Grandpa," she told me during one of our calls. "Something that will make a real difference." With the house payments now increased by the equity loans, money was tight. I had to find part-time work to supplement my pension and Social Security. Joe Martinez, who ran a small independent garage, hired me for 20 hours a week at $18 an hour. It wasn't much, but combined with my fixed income, I could just barely cover my house payments and living expenses. By sophomore year, the phone calls became less frequent. Every other Sunday, then once a month. When I asked about her studies, her answers became shorter, more distant. She was busy with internships, she said, networking events, building her future. I understood. College was supposed to broaden her horizons, introduce her to new people and new possibilities. I didn't want to be the small-town mechanic holding her back from greatness. Junior year, the calls stopped almost entirely. I'd leave voicemails that went unreturned. I sent care packages with homemade cookies and $20 bills tucked inside. The packages came back marked, "Return to sender." When I called the dormitory, they told me she'd moved off campus. No forwarding address. The silence hurt more than I expected. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I'd done something wrong, if my working-class background had finally become too much of an embarrassment for her Stanford world. But I kept making those house payments, kept sending money for her tuition and expenses, even when it meant eating ramen noodles for dinner and shopping at thrift stores for clothes. Graduation day came and went without a word. I found out she'd received her degree by calling the registrar's office. Jenna Marie Hallbrook, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, magna cum laude. I felt proud and heartbroken at the same time. Months passed. Then Mrs. Kim, my elderly neighbor, mentioned seeing something interesting on her computer. "Harold, isn't your granddaughter named Jenna?" she asked while I was fixing her leaky faucet one Saturday morning. "I think I saw her on the internet." That evening, Mrs. Kim showed me an article from the Los Angeles Business Journal on her laptop. There was Jenna, photographed in what looked like an expensive boutique, surrounded by racks of designer clothing. The headline read, "Young entrepreneur launches luxury fashion brand in Beverly Hills." The article explained how Jenna Hallbrook, 23, had founded Ethereal Designs, a high-end clothing line targeting affluent millennials. It mentioned her Stanford education and her vision for accessible luxury. There were quotes about her inspiration, her business philosophy, her plans for expansion. Not one word about family, not one mention of where she came from or who had made her education possible. I read that article 3 times that night. My granddaughter was living in Beverly Hills, running a fashion company, giving interviews to business magazines, and I was learning about her life from a neighbor's computer screen. I tried calling the number listed for Ethereal Designs. A receptionist with a polished voice answered, "Ethereal Designs, how may I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Jenna Hallbrook, please. This is her grandfather." "I'm sorry, Ms. Hallbrook is in meetings all day. Can I take a message?" I left my name and number. She never called back. Over the next few months, I found myself checking the internet at the local library, searching for news about Jenna's company. The business seemed to be thriving. Fashion bloggers were featuring her designs. There were photos of celebrities wearing ethereal pieces to red carpet events. About a year after graduation, I was still checking up on Jenna through online searches at the library. It had become a habit, maybe an unhealthy one, but she was still my granddaughter, still the only family I had left. That's when I found the video that changed everything. It was a local Los Angeles morning show called Coffee and Commerce, featuring successful young entrepreneurs. The host was interviewing Jenna about her fashion brand's expansion into New York markets. She looked polished, confident, wearing what I assumed was one of her own designs. a sleek black dress that probably cost more than I made in a month at Joe's garage. Everything was going fine until the host asked about her background. "Tell us about your journey, Jenna. What shaped you into the businesswoman you are today?" I leaned forward in my chair at the library, eager to hear what she'd say. Maybe she'd mention the old man who'd sacrificed everything to give her a chance at Stanford. Maybe she'd talk about learning the value of hard work from watching her grandfather fix engines. Instead, she laughed. It was a light, dismissive laugh that made my blood run cold. "Well, my childhood was honestly a disaster," she said with a practiced smile. "I grew up with this old mechanic in the middle of nowhere. Bakersfield, if you can imagine. I had to basically reinvent myself from scratch when I got to Stanford. Thank God I had the intelligence to see beyond those circumstances." The host nodded sympathetically. "That must have been challenging, pulling yourself out of that environment." "It was," Jenna replied, adjusting her designer jewelry. "But sometimes you have to cut ties with your past to create your future, you know. I couldn't let where I came from define where I was going." I sat there staring at the computer screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. This old mechanic, that environment, cut ties with your past. Every word was a knife, carefully calculated to distance herself from the man who'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed everything for her success. The librarian asked if I was all right. I must have looked as devastated as I felt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, the casual cruelty of dismissing not just me but everything I'd done for her. The $70,000 equity loans I was still paying off monthly. The part-time work at Joe's garage at age 74. The ramen noodle dinners and thrift store clothes so she could have spending money at Stanford. But more than the financial sacrifice, it was the emotional betrayal that cut deepest. I hadn't just been her grandfather. I'd been her father figure, her protector, her biggest supporter, and she'd rewritten history to make me the obstacle she'd overcome rather than the foundation she'd built upon. 3 days later, I made a decision that surprised even me. I'd taken out a life insurance policy 15 years earlier, back when I first started raising Jenna after Sarah's death. It was a modest policy, $75,000 through AARP, but I'd named her as the sole beneficiary. At the time, it seemed like the responsible thing to do. She was my only heir, and I wanted to make sure she'd have something after I was gone. I drove to the Mutual of Omaha office in downtown Bakersfield and requested the beneficiary change forms. The agent, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, walked me through the paperwork. "Are you sure about this change, Mr. McCauley?" she asked. "Switching from a family member to a charitable organization is a big decision." "I'm sure," I said, signing the documents. "The Boys and Girls Club of Kern County does good work helping kids learn practical skills. Automotive training, welding, electrical work, real jobs that matter." I'd researched the charity carefully. They ran programs teaching disadvantaged youth valuable trade skills, giving them paths to stable, honest careers. Kids who might otherwise fall through the cracks, like I almost had 60 years ago when I started as an apprentice mechanic. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jenna had been ashamed of my real job, but I was ensuring my life savings would help other young people find dignity in honest work. Over the next few months, I made other quiet changes. I met with a lawyer and updated my will, removing Jenna entirely and leaving my house and remaining assets to the same Boys and Girls Club. I organized my financial documents, making sure everything was clear and legally airtight. I didn't tell anyone about these changes. Not Joe at the garage, not Mrs. Kim, certainly not Jenna. I simply went about my life, working my shifts, paying my bills, living quietly in the house that would soon have a different legacy. The strange thing was how peaceful I felt. For over a year, I'd carried the weight of wondering what I'd done wrong, why my granddaughter had cut me out of her life. Now I understood. I hadn't done anything wrong. She'd simply decided that her past, including me, was incompatible with her future image. I started volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club on weekends, teaching basic automotive skills to teenagers. These kids reminded me why I'd loved my work in the first place. They were eager to learn, grateful for guidance, proud of what they could accomplish with their hands. One Saturday afternoon, a 16-year-old named Marcus successfully rebuilt his first engine. The look of pure accomplishment on his face took me back to my early days in the garage, when I'd felt that same pride in honest work. "Mr. Harold," he said, wiping grease from his hands with the same satisfaction I'd felt countless times, "this is the coolest thing I've ever done." I smiled, thinking about Jenna's dismissive comments about my career. "Real jobs," I said quietly. "That's what these are, son. Real jobs that matter." 2 more years passed quietly. I settled into a routine that brought me genuine contentment. Work at Joe's garage 3 days a week, volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club on weekends, and peaceful evenings at home reading automotive magazines or watching old westerns on television. I'd stopped searching for news about Jenna online. Whatever she was doing in Beverly Hills was no longer my concern. I'd made my peace with her decision to erase me from her story. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening in November, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mrs. Kim usually called before coming over, and Joe knew I was nursing a minor back strain from lifting a transmission earlier that week. I opened the door and felt the years collapse around me. Jenna stood on my doorstep, soaked from the rain, looking nothing like the polished entrepreneur I'd seen in that interview 3 years earlier. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Hi, Grandpa," she said quietly. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time in years, which I realized she was. The same plaid couch, the same wood-paneled walls, the same framed photo of her grandmother Margaret on the mantelpiece. "Coffee?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "That would be nice." I made 2 cups, the same way I'd done thousands of times when she was growing up. Black for me, 2 sugars and cream for her. Some habits die hard. She sat at my kitchen table, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I suppose you're wondering why I'm here." The thought had crossed my mind. She took a deep breath. "The business failed, Grandpa. Ethereal Designs is bankrupt. I owe creditors over $200,000, and I can't make rent on my apartment in Beverly Hills. I had to sell my car last month." I sipped my coffee and waited. After 6 years of silence, she wanted to talk. I could listen. I know I should have stayed in touch," she continued, staring into her cup. "But I was building something, you know. I was trying to create a life that mattered." "Seems like you did that for a while," I said. "I saw that interview on the morning show a few years back. You seemed very successful then." She flinched slightly. So she remembered what she'd said. Good. That was all smoke and mirrors. The business was already struggling when I did that interview. I was just trying to project confidence, attract more investors. She looked up at me with eyes that reminded me painfully of her mother. "I made some bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, expanded too fast." I nodded, but didn't respond. She was looking for sympathy, understanding, maybe forgiveness. I had none of those things to offer. I was hoping. She started, then stopped. Tried again. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I was hoping you might be able to help me. Maybe co-sign a loan, or help me get back on my feet somehow." "Help you how?" I asked quietly. "I don't know, I just don't have anywhere else to turn." Tears were starting to form in her eyes. "You always said I was your only family." There it was. The manipulation attempt I'd been expecting. Appeal to our shared history, to the sacrifices I'd made, to the love I'd once felt for her. "I did say that," I agreed. "Back when I thought family meant something to you." She flinched again. "I know I hurt you. I know I should have called more, should have visited, but I was so focused on building my career." "Jenna," I interrupted gently, "do you remember what you said in that interview? About your childhood being a disaster, about having to reinvent yourself to escape this old mechanic?" Her face went pale. "Grandpa, I didn't mean—" "You meant every word, and that's fine. That's your choice to make." I stood up and refilled my coffee cup, taking my time. But choices have consequences. I sat back down and looked at her directly. "I'll think about what you've asked." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Really?" "I said I'd think about it. That's all I'm promising." She stayed for another hour, making small talk about the weather, asking about my health, trying to reconnect with memories of baking cookies and fixing bicycles and bedtime stories. I participated politely but without warmth. When she finally left, promising to call in a few days, I watched her walk to a beat-up Toyota Corolla that had clearly seen better days. I never answered when she called. A week later, she showed up again. This time, I didn't invite her in. "Grandpa, I've been trying to reach you. Did you think about what we discussed?" I did. And the answer is no. She started to argue, to plead, to make promises about paying me back and staying in touch this time. I listened patiently, then closed the door. 2 days after that, she called from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, she was crying. "I went to a lawyer about your estate," she said through her tears. "He told me I'm not listed anywhere. Not on your life insurance, not in your will, nothing. How is that possible? I'm your granddaughter. Biology doesn't make you family, Jenna. Your actions do. And your actions made it very clear that you wanted nothing to do with this old mechanic from the middle of nowhere. But I came back. I'm here now. You came back because you need money, not because you missed your grandfather or regretted your choices. Because you're broke and desperate." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What happened to the man who raised me? The one who said he'd always love me no matter what? He learned the difference between unconditional love and unconditional enabling. He realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices." I hung up. She called back 17 times that day. I didn't answer. That was 6 months ago. I still volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club every weekend. Marcus, the kid who rebuilt that engine, graduated high school and got accepted into a community college automotive program. He stops by Joe's garage sometimes to show me what he's learning. Last month, the club's director told me they'd received notification that they were named as the primary beneficiary of a significant life insurance policy. They were already making plans to expand their automotive training program and help even more kids learn valuable trades. I just smiled and told him that was wonderful news. I'm 74 years old. I live in the same small house, drive the same old pickup truck, and work with the same greasy hands that Jenna was so ashamed of. But I sleep peacefully every night, knowing that my legacy will go to young people who understand the value of honest work. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or explosive. Sometimes it's simply ensuring that your life's work ends up in the right hands. Hands that will appreciate it, build on it, and pass it forward to the next generation. Jenna wanted to cut ties with her past to create her future. I gave her exactly what she asked for. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.